Nobody had Joe Biden's back more than Stacey Abrams. I mean, she has been working to make sure that the Democratic Party is doing everything they can do in Georgia to turn it blue. Please welcome the founder of the voting rights organization Fair Fight, Stacey Abrams. Welcome back, Stacey Abrams. I know all those politicians, those Republican politicians in Georgia wish now that they had just made you governor. Because you know, I'm sure they're just going, if we had just done that, none of this would be going on. When you heard that Georgia had gone for Joe, what went through your mind?
That I can wake up in November and be happy. We've had a few close calls, and we've tried really hard for the last decade, and this was a moment of just grace. We were so excited and so proud.
You know, Stacey, you're very familiar, we all know, with close elections in Georgia, okay?
Yeah.
Your own gubernatorial race in 2018 came down to just 55,000 votes. And right now, Biden leads by just over 14,000 votes. But the Secretary of State just announced that they're going to recount all of the ballots by hand, mind you, just like the Trump campaign requested. Aren't they accommodating? Georgia's never had to do a recount like this before. Are you confident that Biden's lead will hold up? And how long is this going to take exactly?
We don't know how long it's going to take, but we are absolutely certain that this lead is insurmountable. It is absolute, and Joe Biden won Georgia. The reality is they have the right to follow the law, and the law permits this type of behavior. And during my election in 2018, we fought through the courts to make sure every vote got counted. Sadly, they just want to do a recount of what we already accomplished, and I wish them well. But we know that Joe Biden is going to be not only the president of the United States, but the first president in 30 years from the Democratic Party to carry Georgia.
That's right. And you just mentioned that. I mean, Georgia hasn't gone blue for a president since 1992. And many credit your work in the state fighting voter suppression and registering 800,000 new voters with making that a reality, making that happen. What changes are you seeing on the ground there? And do you think Georgia really offers the blueprint for how Democrats can win in other reliably red states?
Last year, we wrote a memo, myself and Lauren Grow-Wargo, who was my campaign manager and is now the CEO of Fair Fight. We wrote a memo that said, here's the way to win Georgia. But we also got to work in Georgia and around the country fighting back against voter suppression. That fight is what I think helped make the difference, because voters who wanted to be heard had the ability this time to actually make it through the gauntlet, get to the ballot box, and cast their votes. But this work did not happen overnight. It didn't happen over 2 years. I started working on voter suppression issues in 2018, but I'd already started back in 2013. After the evisceration of the Voting Rights Act, I got to work with the New Georgia Project, founded that to start registering voters. I then created another organization to help turn those voters into active voters. And I've been working with a coalition of organizations that have been on the ground for years. And so I really hope people recognize that my investment in this and my role in this has been really about bringing it to scale, raising money. I'm the daughter of two pastors. I've been running around this country begging for money, trying to make sure that people committed not only the mission, but put the money into the mission. And it worked. It took time. It took scale. It took a number of hands lifting and pushing. But together we got this done, and we'll get it done again in January for Reverend Warnock and for John Ossoff.
Stacey, all eyes are on the two Georgia runoff elections now that control the entire Senate hangs in the balance. You've already raised more than $10 million for Democratic candidates John Ossoff, as you mentioned before, and Raphael Warnock. But I'm sure Republicans will be pouring money into the race as well. Given how high the stakes are, Republicans have typically had the edge in Georgia runoff. So how do you plan on pulling out not one, but two Democratic wins?
Well, one, we have to understand the anachronistic nature of those runoffs. The times we've had runoffs for Senate races, Democrats not only won the White House overall, but they had enough senators. Adding a Georgia senator was considered a nice to have, not a need to have. And we need to reconsider this election not as a past runoff for Georgia Senate, but as the Doug Jones of 2020, where we know that the essential nature of this election changes the future of our country, protects health care, protects access to jobs, and protects access to justice. We need to remember that Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are the only ways that we can guarantee that Mitch McConnell will actually finally pass legislation to renew recovery investment, to help protect those jobs for retail workers, for low-wage workers who are suffering, are going to go into Christmas, go into New Year's, not knowing if they're going to be able to stay in their homes. Jon Ossoff, Raphael Warnock, GASenate.com. That's the only way we can make certain that the future we need comes to fruition with Joe Biden as our president.
Well, now both Republican Senate candidates, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, are calling on Georgia's Secretary of State, who's a Republican himself actually, to resign, despite any reported evidence of election mismanagement. What do you make of their demand? Because as I understand it, you have previously been critical of Secretary of State Raffensperger's election management.
I have been critical because he has been wrong. In this case, we know that there remain challenges with our election system, but none of those challenges are the ones that Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are levying. They are arguing that they shouldn't be in runoffs. They're arguing that the numbers should have been in their favor. That's not how voting works. And in this case, we know that more people were actually able to get their votes counted. And by getting their votes counted, we saw the outcome. It is the Republican Party that has maintained this runoff system that is a vestige of Jim Crow, which was designed to keep Black votes from counting effectively in deciding the outcome of elections. And so if they want to grapple with this issue in 2021, they can remove the runoff system. But until then, this is the law of Georgia, and they've got to deal with it.
Okay. So Trump is still refusing to concede this election, as we know. And Republican leaders like Mitch McConnell and Mike Pompeo have backed him in. They backed him up. In fact, only a handful of Republicans have even acknowledged President-elect Biden's victory. I think they're trying to fire up Trump's base to turn out for the Georgia runoff. What do you say?
I think that's exactly it. I think we're also watching just the kind of public temper tantrum we've become immune to or inured to over the last 4 years. But what we know is this. Joe Biden didn't just win Georgia. Joe Biden won Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania. We know that we were able to fight across this country for voter protection and for voter access, and he won. And now they're focusing on Georgia because they're stunned that they lost, but more importantly, because they know what's at stake and they know what we're capable of. We won Georgia in 2020 and will win it again in 2021 and send Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock to the U.S. Senate through GASenate.com.